Today, I want to speak about something that many of us hesitate to acknowledge but feel deeply when it surfaces: loneliness. Let's imagine a woman with no friend. She's smart, capable, and full of potential, but there's a quiet space in her life where connection should thrive. What does it mean to be a woman with no friend? It's not just the absence of people. It's the absence of being truly seen, understood, and valued. It's not about weakness, but about the universal longing for connection, a basic human need. We often paint loneliness as a personal failing, but I want to challenge that today. Loneliness isn't about who you are, it's about what you've endured, how you've protected yourself, and the barriers you've built, often without realizing. This is not a sad story. This is a story of strength, resilience, and hope. It's a story of understanding why we are wired for connection and how finding even one true friend can change everything. Tonight, let's explore the path from isolation to connection. It's a journey of courage, vulnerability, and learning to believe that we are worthy of love and belonging. Loneliness is universal. Many people at some point in their lives have felt the weight of disconnection. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, or what you've achieved, loneliness doesn't discriminate. It can touch the young and the old, the successful and the struggling, the extrovert and the introvert. What's striking, though, is how rarely we talk about it. Society has conditioned us to present ourselves as fulfilled, as though our social lives are as curated as our social media feeds. We post photos of group dinners, celebrations, and smiling faces, but behind the scenes, there's often a very different reality. Loneliness hides in plain sight. It's masked by busy schedules, polite small talk, and the facade of being fine. It's tucked away behind phrases like, "I've just been so busy," or "I'm okay, really." We wear busyness like a badge of honor, as though being perpetually occupied will protect us from being vulnerable. But deep down, we know better. Loneliness whispers in the quiet moments, when the phone doesn't ring, when an achievement goes unshared, or when we sit in a room full of people and still feel unseen. We might convince ourselves it's temporary or that it's just a phase, but the truth is, it often goes unaddressed for far too long. What makes loneliness even harder to confront is the sense of shame it brings. There's a stigma attached to admitting we feel isolated. It feels like a failure, as though we're saying, "I'm not enough," or "I don't belong." But loneliness isn't a reflection of who we are. It's a reflection of how deeply we crave connection, how much we long to be known and understood. And that's not a weakness. It's a testament to our humanity. Acknowledging loneliness isn't easy, but it's the first step toward breaking the silence that surrounds it. When we talk about it, we take away its power. When we name it, we begin to reclaim our stories. And when we look around, we start to see that we're not alone in feeling alone. In that realization, a spark of hope begins to grow. Connection is a basic need. As humans, we are wired for it in ways that go deeper than we often realize. From the moment we are born, we seek connection. A baby reaches for its mother not just for sustenance, but for comfort, warmth, and the reassurance that it is not alone. This need doesn't disappear as we grow older, it evolves, taking new shapes and forms, but the essence remains the same. We long to feel seen, heard, and understood. Friendship is one of the most profound ways we meet this need. It's not just about sharing laughs or passing time. It's about forging bonds that ground us, lift us, and remind us of who we are. True friendship is where vulnerability meets safety. It's the space where we can set down our masks and be ourselves, free from judgment or pretense. And in that space, something magical happens. We find healing, we find validation, we find the strength to face challenges we thought were insurmountable, simply because someone else is standing beside us. Science tells us that connection isn't just emotional, it's physical. When we share meaningful moments with others, our brains release oxytocin, a hormone often called the bonding chemical. It reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, and even boosts our immunity. Friendship, quite literally, makes us healthier. But it's more than just chemistry. Connection touches the soul. It gives us purpose and reminds us of our shared humanity. Without it, life feels hollow, no matter how full our schedules or accomplishments might be. We can surround ourselves with people yet still feel isolated if those connections lack depth. That's why authentic relationships matter. They aren't built overnight and they aren't always easy, but they are vital. They remind us that we're not alone, even in our struggles. They bring light to our darkest days and amplify the joy of our brightest ones. Connection isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline. It's what sustains us, strengthens us, and gives life its richest meaning. It's not something we can simply opt out of. It's as essential to our well-being as air, food, and water, because at our core, we are not meant to walk this life alone. Shame and silence often go hand in hand. When it comes to loneliness, this pairing can be especially heavy, locking people in a cycle that feels impossible to break. Loneliness carries a stigma, one that whispers lies like, "You're the only one feeling this way," or "If you were better, smarter, or more lovable, you wouldn't be alone." These lies have power because they thrive in silence. When we feel isolated, we're less likely to reach out. And when we don't reach out, the isolation deepens. It becomes a self-reinforcing loop, a quiet struggle that rarely sees the light of day. We tell ourselves that admitting loneliness is admitting failure. We fear being judged, pitied, or misunderstood. So we push it down, hide it behind a smile, and pretend we're okay. But shame festers in secrecy. It grows stronger the longer we avoid confronting it, convincing us that reaching out will only confirm the fears we already hold about ourselves. And yet, the irony is this. Loneliness is one of the most universal human experiences. Almost everyone at some point has felt it. It doesn't matter how popular, successful, or put together someone seems, loneliness doesn't discriminate. But because we don't talk about it, we don't see just how common it really is. Instead, we feel alone in our struggle, as though we're navigating uncharted waters. The silence around loneliness isn't just personal, it's cultural. We live in a world that values independence, self-sufficiency, and the appearance of having it all together. Admitting you're lonely can feel like going against everything society tells you to be. But the truth is, there's no weakness in loneliness. There's no failure in wanting connection. In fact, acknowledging that longing is one of the most courageous things we can do. When we speak the truth about our feelings, we begin to break the hold shame has over us. We open the door to understanding, empathy, and most importantly, connection. Because silence might protect us from vulnerability, but it also keeps us from the very thing we need most, the chance to be truly seen and heard. Barriers to friendship can feel insurmountable at times. These barriers are often invisible, yet they shape the way we interact with others and the connections we allow ourselves to form. Personal insecurities are one of the most common walls. When we doubt our worth, it's easy to assume others will doubt it too. We question whether we're interesting enough, kind enough, or simply enough to be someone's friend. That self-doubt can stop us from reaching out, keeping us in a cycle of isolation. Past betrayals also play a significant role. When someone we trusted has hurt us, it leaves a mark. It teaches us to be cautious, to guard our hearts, and to question people's intentions. We tell ourselves we're being smart, that we're protecting ourselves, but sometimes those defenses keep out the very people who might bring healing and joy into our lives. Societal pressures add another layer. We live in a world that often equates success with self-reliance, as though needing others is a sign of weakness. This pressure can make us hesitant to admit we want deeper connections. We convince ourselves we're too busy, or that prioritizing friendships is a luxury, not a necessity. Then there's the fear of rejection, a universal human fear. Putting yourself out there, even in small ways, can feel like a risk. What if they don't like me? What if I'm too much? These thoughts can be paralyzing, keeping us from taking the steps that lead to meaningful relationships. But not all barriers are internal. Sometimes they're circumstantial. Life gets busy. Work, family, and responsibilities pile up, and friendships can feel like something we'll get to later. Days turn into months, and before we know it, the connections we once had feel distant or even lost. These barriers are real, and they're not always easy to overcome, but they're not unbreakable. The first step is recognizing them, naming the fears, the hesitations, and the wounds that hold us back. Because when we understand the walls we've built, we can begin to dismantle them, brick by brick. It's not an easy process, but on the other side of those barriers lies something worth every effort: connection, trust, and the kind of friendships that remind us why we're better together. There is strength in vulnerability. It might not feel that way at first. Vulnerability often feels like exposure, like stepping into the unknown without the armor we've grown used to wearing. But acknowledging loneliness, saying out loud, "I feel disconnected," is one of the bravest acts a person can take. We live in a world that celebrates independence, resilience, and self-sufficiency. Admitting you're lonely can feel like admitting you've fallen short, like there's something wrong with you. But that's not true. Loneliness isn't a failure, it's a signal. It's your heart's way of telling you that connection matters, that relationships are essential to your well-being. And hearing that signal instead of ignoring it requires incredible courage. It takes strength to sit with uncomfortable feelings, to acknowledge what you're missing, and to face the fear of rejection that can come with reaching out. Vulnerability is the act of showing up anyway. It's saying, "This is hard, but I'm willing to take the risk because connection is worth it." It's opening yourself up to the possibility of being seen, not the curated, polished version of you, but the real you. And that's scary, but it's also where the magic happens. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you give others permission to do the same. You create a space where honesty and authenticity can grow, where walls come down and true connection becomes possible. Vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. It's the birthplace of courage. It's what allows us to forge relationships that go beyond the surface. Relationships that are built on trust, empathy, and mutual understanding. Taking steps to connect doesn't mean you'll always get it right. Not every attempt will lead to a lasting friendship, and not everyone will respond the way you hope. But every step you take is an act of defiance against the isolation that loneliness brings. It's a declaration that you believe in the power of connection, even when it feels out of reach. And in that belief, you reclaim your power. Because vulnerability isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to try, and that bravery can change everything. Self-worth is at the heart of every meaningful connection. It's the quiet belief that you are enough, that who you are as you are is deserving of love and belonging. Without it, forming genuine friendships can feel like trying to build a house on an unstable foundation. When we doubt our worthiness, we approach relationships from a place of fear. We overthink every word, every action, wondering if we're being judged or if we measure up. We might cling too tightly, afraid that if we let go, the connection will vanish. Or we might hold back entirely, never allowing ourselves to fully show up. This fear creates distance, even when we long for closeness. Believing in your worth changes everything. It allows you to step into relationships with confidence, not the kind that demands attention, but the quiet assurance that you bring value simply by being yourself. You no longer feel the need to perform, to please, or to prove your worth. Instead, you show up authentically, creating space for others to do the same. This authenticity is what makes friendships thrive. When you believe you're enough, you stop seeking validation from external sources. You're not waiting for someone else to affirm your value because you already know it within yourself. And that knowing creates a freedom to connect without fear of rejection defining your self-esteem. Self-worth also sets boundaries. It helps you recognize when a relationship isn't serving you, when it's one-sided or harmful. It gives you the courage to walk away from connections that drain you, making room for ones that nurture and uplift you. But self-worth isn't about arrogance or ego. It's not about thinking you're better than others. It's about understanding that you are no less worthy than anyone else. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness, compassion, and respect that you would offer a dear friend. This inner belief becomes a mirror for the relationships you attract. When you carry yourself with self-worth, you naturally gravitate toward people who see and honor your value. Friendships rooted in mutual respect and authenticity flourish because they're built on a foundation of shared humanity. And that foundation starts with one simple truth: you are worthy of connection, just as you are. True friendship isn't measured by numbers. It's not about how many names are on your contact list or how many people show up to your birthday party. It's about the depth of the connections you share. Having many acquaintances can be comforting in its own way, but when life gets hard, it's the few true friends who make all the difference. These are the friends who see you, the real you, beyond the surface. They know your quirks, your fears, and your dreams, and they love you, not in spite of them, but because of them. With them, there's no need to perform or pretend. You can show up as you are, whether that's joyful, struggling, or somewhere in between. These friendships are rare, and they require time, effort, and trust to cultivate. They aren't built overnight, nor do they rely on constant interaction. You might go weeks or even months without speaking, but when you reconnect, it feels as though no time has passed. It's the quality of the bond that sustains it, not the frequency of the conversations. True friends are the ones who show up when it matters most. They celebrate your successes as though they were their own, and they stand by you when life feels heavy. They don't just listen, they hear you. They don't just support you, they believe in you. In a world that often values popularity and social clout, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking more is better, but more isn't always meaningful. A single deep, authentic connection can bring more joy, comfort, and strength than 100 shallow ones ever could. Quality friendships remind us that we don't have to face life alone. They provide a safe space to laugh, cry, and grow. They challenge us to be better while accepting us as we are. And when the storms of life come, they are the steady anchors that keep us grounded. It's not about filling your life with people, it's about filling your heart with the kind of friendships that truly matter. And we talked about this on the podcast last year, how Heat It completely changed him. Because at the end of the day, it's not how many people surround you, it's how deeply you're connected to the ones who do. Cultural and gender expectations often place women under a unique kind of scrutiny. There's an unspoken pressure to appear socially fulfilled, as though the measure of a woman's success is tied not only to her personal achievements, but also to the strength and breadth of her relationships. Women are expected to be nurturers, the ones who hold families, friendships, and communities together. This expectation creates an image of someone who is always surrounded by friends, effortlessly maintaining deep and meaningful connections. But this image is often far from reality. Life is complex, and relationships take time and energy, both of which are limited resources. For many women, the demands of work, caregiving, and societal roles leave little room for cultivating friendships. Yet the pressure to appear socially connected persists. It's seen in the casual questions at gatherings. How's your social life? Or are you meeting up with friends? That seem harmless but can feel loaded when the reality doesn't match the expectation. The stigma of loneliness for women can feel particularly isolating. Admitting that you feel disconnected or lack close friendships may feel like a failure to live up to cultural ideals. For some, it might even evoke shame, as though they are lacking something intrinsic to being a woman. This is compounded by the portrayal of female friendships in media. We see women depicted in tight-knit groups, always laughing, always supportive, always present. While these portrayals can be uplifting, they can also set unrealistic standards, making women feel as though they are falling short if their reality doesn't align with the idealized version. Even within friendships, gender expectations can create pressure. Women often feel the need to be the one who reaches out, organizes plans, or keeps the connection alive. This emotional labor, though often invisible, can be exhausting, especially when it's not reciprocated. These pressures can exacerbate feelings of loneliness by making it harder to acknowledge and address them. It's difficult to say, "I feel alone," when the world expects you to be surrounded by connection. But breaking free from these cultural and gendered expectations begins with challenging the narrative. Loneliness doesn't define your worth, and the pressure to appear socially fulfilled isn't a reflection of who you truly are. It's okay to feel disconnected, and it's okay to admit it. because in naming the struggle, we take the first step toward changing it. Healing begins with connection. It doesn't take a crowd, a packed calendar, or a whirlwind of social activities to ease the ache of loneliness. Sometimes all it takes is one person. One authentic connection can be life-changing. It's not about grand gestures or constant interaction. It's about feeling truly seen and understood. It's about the moment someone listens without judgment, offering empathy instead of solutions. It's about the space where vulnerability is met with acceptance, not discomfort. That's where healing lives. Authentic connection reminds us that we're not alone, even in our darkest moments. It counters the voice of loneliness that says, "No one understands," with the gentle reassurance of, "I'm here with you." It provides a safe haven where we can let our guard down, step out of isolation, and find the courage to share the pieces of ourselves we've kept hidden. This kind of connection doesn't have to come from someone who's known us for years. It can be forged in a moment of shared understanding with a stranger or a deep conversation with a new friend. What matters is the authenticity, the genuine presence and care that make us feel valued and supported. Through connection, wounds begin to mend. The hurt of feeling invisible or unworthy softens when someone chooses to show up, when they offer their time, their attention, and their heart. Even small acts of connection, a smile, a kind word, a thoughtful gesture, can ripple outward, touching parts of us we thought were unreachable. This isn't to say that one connection erases all pain, but it can be a starting point. It can remind us of what's possible. It can plant the seed of hope, showing us that healing doesn't have to happen alone. In the presence of authentic connection, we find strength we didn't know we had. We discover that our struggles are not insurmountable and that our stories, no matter how messy or imperfect, deserve to be shared. And as we allow ourselves to connect with others, we open the door to something even more profound, the chance to reconnect with ourselves. Because in the end, healing isn't just about being supported. It's about rediscovering the part of us that believes we are worthy of love and belonging. Loneliness can feel overwhelming, as though it's a weight that will never lift. But it's important to remember this: loneliness is not permanent. It's not a fixed state or a defining characteristic. It's a season, a chapter in your story, not the entire book. Even in the darkest moments, there is hope for the future. Connection is always within reach, though it may take intentional effort to find it. Sometimes that effort begins with small, brave steps: a smile at a stranger, a message to an old friend, or joining a group with shared interests can plant the seeds of connection. These steps may feel awkward or insignificant at first, but they hold the power to grow into something meaningful over time. Self-compassion is also essential on this journey. It's easy to blame yourself for feeling lonely, to think there's something wrong with you for struggling, but loneliness is not a flaw, it's a human experience. Treat yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a friend. Allow yourself to feel what you feel without judgment, and remind yourself that you are worthy of connection. Openness can be the bridge that leads to healing. When you're open to new experiences, new people, and even new ways of thinking, you create opportunities for connection to find you. This doesn't mean you need to change who you are. It means being willing to let others see the real you, trusting that authenticity will draw the right people into your life. There will be setbacks, moments when connection feels out of reach, or when vulnerability feels too risky. But even in those moments, hope remains. Every effort, no matter how small, is a step forward. And with time, those steps add up. They lead to friendships that fill your life with joy, understanding, and support. They remind you that you are never truly alone, even when loneliness tries to convince you otherwise. Hope for the future is not just wishful thinking. It's a quiet certainty that connection is possible. Because it is. No matter where you are right now, there's always a path forward. A path that leads to belonging, to love, and to the profound truth that you are not alone. Loneliness can feel like a heavy shadow, one that lingers and whispers doubts into the quietest parts of our minds. But it's important to remember that loneliness, while profound, is not the end of the story. It's a signal, a reminder of our deeply human need for connection, and it carries with it the possibility for change. Through self-compassion, intentional effort, and the courage to be open, we can begin to bridge the gap between isolation and connection. And though the journey may not always be easy, it is one worth taking, because every moment of vulnerability, every small act of reaching out, and every ounce of hope brings us closer to the relationships that remind us of our worth and our shared humanity. So let's embrace the belief that connection is always within reach, no matter where we stand today. And in doing so, may we rediscover not only the power of friendship, but also the profound truth that we are never truly alone. There is always hope, and with hope, there is always a way forward.